What's going on, guys, and welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where every single week I, Graham Gius and Matthews, break down all the original programming that I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking Table for Three, the Women's Championship Evolution episode that aired after Raw this past week on the network, featuring Natalya, Beth Phoenix, and Nia Jax. That was, of course, filmed over WrestleMania weekend a few months back. But another enjoyable episode on the whole. Clocks in at about 24-25 minutes. As always, the time just flies by. So let's get started here. Phoenix and Natalya talk about having been able to work with each other every Tuesday. Again, by this point, this was filmed the night of the Hall of Fame on the Friday before WrestleMania. So by that point, we had the Mixed Match Challenge. Natalya was on SmackDown at that point. Beth Phoenix was doing the commentary for the Mixed Match Challenge show that was airing after SmackDown at that point. So they were seeing each other every single Tuesday. Nia Jax was a bit jealous because she was on Raw. And they talk about the differences between Raw and SmackDown, and that Raw is a completely different ballgame, Nia Jax says. And that SmackDown is much more laid back. But then again, Nia Jax admits that she likes the pressure of being kind of on that high-intensity show that is Monday Night Raw. And Natalya even says, I would love to work with the Raw girls. I've been on SmackDown since the beginning of the brand split. Moving over to Raw at some point would be great. And sure enough, 2 weeks after this was filmed, she was moved on over to Raw in the Superstar Shakeup. Natalya and Beth Phoenix, or rather Nia Jax, Natalya and Nia Jax talk about never having had a match before. Now, they did recently on Raw, but of course, like I said, this was filmed over WrestleMania weekend. They talked about their very brief interaction in the Women's Rumble earlier this year between Beth and Natalya and Nia Jax, but beyond that, Nia Jax and Natalya, aside from maybe a tag team match here or there, had never crossed paths, which is crazy. So anyway, Natalya talks about how Two Paws, her fucking cat, peed on Natalya's dress. She peed on the dress that she was going to wear for the Hall of Fame, so thank God for Beth Phoenix. It was going to be there that night. She brought 2 dresses with her just by coincidence, pure coincidence, and Natalya's going to wear one of those for the Hall of Fame. So speaking of the Hall of Fame, Natalya recalls inducting Beth Phoenix into the Hall of Fame 1 year earlier. Nia Jax talks about how this WrestleMania is Stephanie McMahon's first ever WrestleMania match, which is crazy. And then they fucking jerk off the McMahons by praising the McMahons for leading by example, and that Stephanie McMahon is in the greatest shape of her life. Like, good way to get pushed, Nia. Just, praise Stephanie up and down. You can't have a fucking women's evolution shit these days, whether it be a Table for Three, or a fucking documentary, or an announcement that doesn't include Stephanie McMahon. They always have to include Stephanie every fucking time, and this is no exception. I fucking hate it. Anyway, Natalya talks about having witnessed the women's evolution, the progression of it over the last 10 years, how April 2018 marked 10 years that she arrived on the main roster, which is insane, which I think I tweeted at that time on Twitter, but it really is crazy to realize, look, I'm not the biggest Natalya fan at all. But it really is insane to realize that Natalya has now stood the test of time and has lasted longer than any other female, I think, in WWE history, in terms of an in-ring active performer on the roster that rarely gets hurt and has been on TV, not even on and off, but like largely has been on TV almost always for the past decade. That's pretty crazy. They talk about having the women they had a special moment in Gorilla during the Women's Royal Rumble. They all kind of embraced each other while the bell rang, the buzzer went off. They all kind of cheered for each other when one woman went down to the ring. They talked about the highlights from the Women's and the Men's Royal Rumble, not from this year, but rather from when Beth Phoenix competed in the 2010 Royal Rumble. One of my favorite Royal Rumble matches of all time, when Beth Phoenix took part in that matchup and eliminated the Great Khali. And how she even questioned at one point, like, am I truly making a difference with what I'm doing? But moments like that in the Women's Royal Rumble were kind of nice vindications for her to kind of remind her that, yes, what I'm doing is actually making a difference. Nia Jax talks about how WWE and wrestling and WrestleMania, whatever, is all about moments. Not really matches, but people's favorite moments. And Nia Jax said that her favorite WrestleMania moment was not really necessarily the match itself, but the final few minutes of Shawn Michaels versus Ric Flair from WrestleMania 24. I think Nia Jax might have been at that WrestleMania. I know The Rock inducted his dad and grandfather into the Hall of Fame that weekend, so I believe Nia Jax might have been there, if I'm not mistaken. I know she went to WrestleMania 28. But anyway, she said that the I'm sorry, I love you line from Shawn Michaels to Ric Flair was her favorite WrestleMania moment of all time. I'm sure before she won the Raw Women's Championship that Sunday at WrestleMania. Natalya talked about how she was the first and I think only woman ever to kick out of the Glam Slam, which I completely forgot about. And the fucking stupid thing about this was that I remember this match. It was a match on SmackDown that Beth and Natalya had back in like September of 2008. I think I even put that on my top 25 best matches list for WWE in 2012 as number 25. And there was like the only women's match on the fucking thing, because back then women's matches were abysmal and they never were given enough time. But this was a great match. Easily one of the best women's matches I've seen from that time period. And it was on a throwaway edition of SmackDown. Like, the move meant nothing. The commentators kind of treated it like a big deal. But by and large, it was like, she kicked out of the Glam Slam. Like, the match meant nothing. They were having a match for the fucking sake of having a match. And it was so stupid. And they really should have built that up as like a big feud between Natalya and Beth Phoenix, because that was around the point they were doing the whole Divas of Doom thing, which they didn't really talk about here. They talked about their friendship, but not really the Divas of Doom thing back from 2011. And that was kind of blown off without a real conclusion. And then they had a random match on SmackDown where Natalya kicked out of the Glam Slam, just randomly. Now, I'm sure by that point, Beth Phoenix knew that she was leaving the company, so she probably outright suggested, like, I want a match with Natalya on my way out, because she left the company like a month later. So that's probably what it was. So at least they had their one-on-one match in WWE, but still, it should have been a bigger deal than what it was. Anyway, Nia Jax praised Beth Phoenix and the women of the past, saying that if it wasn't for you and all those other women, it wouldn't have caused WWE to realize that something needed to change with women's wrestling in this company. Beth Phoenix also praises Nia Jax in return for changing the perception of power and how it can be represented. Edge and Christian apparently had Nia Jax on the Edge and Christian show, which the Season 2 has yet to debut. There's still no word on when Season 2 will debut. We found out back over WrestleMania weekend that Season 2 was in the works, but that was 4 months ago, so I'm not exactly sure when they have it planned or slated to debut. I'm looking forward to it, though. I mean, the first season was much better than I thought it would be, in the second half anyway. But anyway, what I was going to say was that Edge and Christian had Nia Jax in their show. We see a brief clip of that, and that Edge and Christian called Nia Jax beautiful, and that she took that to heart. Nia Jax said that, the last couple of years in WWE have been fun, but really she's been able to be herself for the last year and representing plus-size models and, just kind of being who she is actually in real life with her over-the-top personality and not just a one-dimensional monster. A character that she plays well, but it has been great this year to kind of see her develop her own persona and become a breakout babyface, and they kind of fucked that up in recent months with the whole Ronda Rousey-Nia Jax feud. But prior to that, I think they were doing a great job of endearing her to the audience. Anyway, so Nia Jax wondered why she was never being represented because of her size, like, I think I should be on posters too. And eventually she was. Going into WrestleMania 34, she was on banners, she was on posters, and she said that she was grateful to be a part of it. Natalya actually revealed that she had an eating disorder, not here on the show, but on Instagram. Like before an episode of Total Divas aired where Alexa Bliss was going to do it on the show that night. And that took a lot of courage. He talked about that. We actually see pictures. I had never seen the post. I only joined Instagram a few fucking weeks ago, so I'd never seen the post before. But yeah, she looked really, really thin. Like, this was when she was 18, 19 years old, so like 15 years ago maybe. I know she's maybe like in her mid-30s now, so at least 10, 15 years ago. She said that she was never really happy. She was never really healthy when she was that thin. And it wasn't until she started wrestling that really made her realize, like, hey, I like being thicker, I like being bigger, I like being stronger, and that wrestling really kind of brought that out of her. And Phoenix said that you should be embracing what makes you different. That's her message kind of for this episode, which is cool. They also talk about Ronda Rousey and that Natalya, this was before they kind of linked up on Raw a few weeks after this, but Natalya said, I can relate more to Ronda. Like, while she was unstoppable in UFC, that was great and all, but I feel like I can relate more to her now, that she's not unstoppable, that she has suffered losses, that she is vulnerable, that she is not invincible, you know what I mean? Which is kind of cool to kind of look back on now and seeing their friendship develop on Raw in recent months. Anyway, so Beth Phoenix talked about how she really had a WrestleMania moment at WrestleMania 28, and that every past WrestleMania before that, she felt overwhelmed and that she was under pressure and she didn't really take in the moment, as everyone is encouraged to do when they eventually make it to WrestleMania. I think she was a part of WrestleMania 24 in that tag team match with Melina against Maria and I think Ashley Marasso. I think because Mickie James got hurt or something. I don't remember. That match was abysmal. But that WrestleMania she was a part of, she was in the WrestleMania Women's Battle Royal at 25. She was in that 10 Divas tag team match at WrestleMania 26, but it wasn't until WrestleMania 28 when she teamed with Eve against Kelly and Marina Menounos that she took in the moment and realized, like, holy shit, this is amazing. And speaking of which, Nia Jax talks about not wanting to trip at WrestleMania 33 and that she didn't really take in the moment. She felt like it was the longest walk of her life. She didn't want to fall off the fucking stage. There's no railing, obviously, especially that year, WrestleMania 33, which was one of, if not the most beautiful stage and set they've ever done for WrestleMania. So maybe she took in the moment this year while making her entrance to the ring for her Raw Women's Championship match. Natalya talks about having a close connection to Total Divas, having been a part of the show since episode 1. She was told that they were only supposed to do 8 episodes, and now fucking 8 seasons later, they're on season 8 or 9, set to premiere in like a month or two, which is crazy. Natalya also shared a cool little story here that I guess is kind of logical, but I never really realized this before, that when she first debuted on the main roster 10 years ago, she was told she had to dye her hair red because her and Beth Phoenix looked too much alike each other. Now, they weren't on the same show, mind you, but they did look a lot alike at that point. So Natalya changed their hair red, which you can see in that first ever Divas Championship match, to crown the inaugural Divas Champion back at Great American Bash 08. You can see her with the red hair there. And then right after that, she kind of went back to being blonde by like early 2009 and whatever. But I never knew that, which was kind of interesting. So that was why she had red hair, because Vince McMahon thought they looked too much alike, and they didn't want people to confuse each other. They didn't want fans to confuse one with the other. So, and Beth Phoenix also kind of talked about it more broadly, how women were kind of defined by their hair color back then, and that it has really changed, obviously, in recent years. Nia Jax talked about debuting in NXT right after the 4 Horsewomen were formed and working with Bayley, and how that was a big step forward. Beth Phoenix and Natalya recall being frustrated back in the day about the Revolution not really being ready for them when they were the ones that were ready for the Women's Revolution, Evolution, whatever you want to call it, including for the first ever Women's Tables Tag Team match, which I enjoyed at the time and I still enjoy in retrospect. It was before they were the Divas of Doom, but it was Beth Phoenix and Natalya versus Laycool, Michelle McCool and Layla at TLC 2010 in the first ever Women's Tag Team Tables match. And Natalya talked about how it was a great moment, it was a fun match, we really moved the Evolution forward at that point, and then we went back to fucking having like a 3-minute match the very next night on TV. And Natalya also talked about her match with Charlotte very briefly from NXT TakeOver, the first ever TakeOver, not Arrival, but TakeOver from May of 2014, when she and Charlotte faced off for the NXT Women's Championship, and how that was such a great match, one of the best matches of both of their careers, and how she told Triple H after that I want to do that on the main roster. I want to do what I did with Charlotte on the main roster, and Triple H said, it'll take time, but in due time we will get there, and true to his word, they have since brought that style to the main roster, which is great. And they kind of talked about some small stuff to close out the episode. But that was the Women's Championship Evolution edition of Table for 3 with Beth Phoenix, Nia Jax, and Natalya. Very enjoyable episode. Like I said, the 24 minutes, almost like 24 hours. 24 minutes just flies by. Be sure to check it out on the WWE Network. Aired after all this past week. It's under the original special, under Table for 3. So whatever airs on Raw, or after Raw rather, next week, on the network, I will talk about here on Network and Chill next Tuesday. In the meantime, I will be back with a new Network and Chill edition right here on the channel on Friday, reviewing the Season 1, Episode 3 of Ms. and Mrs. And the show has been hit or miss so far. We'll see how Season 1, Episode 3 is. I don't have high hopes, but I will be talking about it nonetheless this Friday right here on the channel on WWE Network and Chill. So until then, guys, we got a new hashtag AskGSM coming on Wednesday. We have WrestleRant radio excerpts coming on Thursday. So plenty of content coming up for you guys right here this week on the channel. So be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. Enjoy the rest of your week, guys. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.